It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Hello again, this is Brant Handley. I'm founder and managing director of ROI Executive Search, and we do retained executive search across the middle market. Today's the next step in our journey into the corner office, and I'm here to welcome a friend, Michael Egmont. Michael and I have known each other for about 7 or 8 years, Michael. I think so, please. Yeah. And getting to know him very personally. He is a wonderful foodie, I guess is the best way to describe it, a food expert. Just coming back from Florida with, I don't know how many restaurants you gave us to, and we went back so many times, but he and I have eaten our way through now, not just Connecticut, but the reaches of Boca Raton in Florida. But we're here today to talk about Flagship Networks, and Michael's a founding partner of Flagship, and he's an IT industry veteran with over 25 years of experience who takes great pride in finding the right technologies to meet clients' requirements. His basic philosophy drives the company, and that's understanding clients' business challenges and delivering valued insights and outcomes through IT. Mike served for many years on the Dell Computers Advisory Council, and prior to founding Flagship, was vice president at Connect Computer Corporation, and also worked at Apple for a minute.
I did.
Yeah. Yep. Great to hear more about that. He graduated from Fairfield University with a bachelor's degree in business management and information systems. Mike Egmont, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brant. Thanks for having us.
Now, I think you're from Connecticut originally. Is that right?
No, I'm actually a true New Yorker.
Ah, right. Okay.
Born in Manhattan.
Born in Manhattan. Great.
Right.
Well, tell us about that. Some of your early years, what mom and dad did, brothers and sisters.
Well, I was born in Manhattan, both to immigrants. My mother came from France. She was recruited to work for the United Nations. So just her and her mother came here, I think around 1969.
Wow.
And my father came from Eastern Europe, from Romania.
Wow.
And
cool.
They met in New York, got married. We lived there for a little bit, and then we moved to Westchester, so just outside the city.
Brothers and sisters?
One brother.
One brother. Younger, older? Younger.
4.5 years.
And wow, so Romanian and French in the home growing up? Did you get exposed to that at all, or did they immediately assimilate as so many immigrants do?
They did. Actually, so my mother was from France, but her background was Russian.
Russian?
Actually, from the very area that's getting pounded by Russia. Or they've retreated from that area, that Odessa region there, the port area, beautiful area. Yeah. I've never been, but seen pictures. So.
And Dad?
Dad, born and raised in Romania. His parents had to make the tough choice to leave Romania. They had the opportunity, but the government said you have to leave your son behind, him, because he was an engineer, or is an engineer.
Was valued,
and they wouldn't let him leave.
Wow.
So they said they would leave and petition for him to come, and so they had to do that for 5 years. They never knew if they would see him again.
Wow.
But then Nixon was the first U.S. president to go to visit Romania, and he came with a list of people that he wanted the government to let go. My dad's name was on that list.
No kidding. Wow.
And they let him go, and he was able to join his family in the U.S.
Fabulous. And how old was a man was he at that stage?
He was upper 20s.
Early
20s. Yeah. 27, 28.
Wow. How did he make the Nixon list?
Was already married and divorced.
Yeah. How did he make that list? Was it? He must have been doing pretty high level work.
Yeah. My grandfather, his father had made some friends with people that knew people at the State Department, and it was a lot of petitioning for years.
Wow.
At the time there was a big interest in on the U.S. government helping talented people get out and families getting reunited from Eastern Bloc countries.
Right.
So that's how he came, but he couldn't work as an engineer. Had to work driving a big tractor trailer around Brooklyn, and he told me he had never done that, and somehow they just let him do it. Then he went to fixing elevators.
Why couldn't he work as an engineer? What was the?
Well, I think it was because they didn't accept his engineering degree, so he had to go to Brooklyn Polytechnic.
And he probably had to study English as well, right?
Study English, which he speaks quite well. Right. And but he had to basically redo his engineering degree at night while driving a truck and working fixing elevators, and then he went on to Wharton School of Business too, got credits there.
No kidding. So was he doing the truck driving when you were born?
No, that was a short stint. I mean, basically,
just to get
he just, I think in 3 years or so, was able to redo his engineering degree, which he said was easier than the one he had to get in Romania.
Right.
And then was able to, get back into his career. So that's a sort of example of the sort of challenges besides language and cultural. Immigrants have to potentially go, but he was a very hard worker, was determined, not to, just assume, okay, well, I'll be a taxi driver. No, he was like, I'm an engineer and I'm going to work. And he worked his way up the corporate ladder, worked for a few corporations, and was vice president of engineering for some big companies.
Wow. So by the time you and your brother came around, he was already working back in his profession.
He was already working in his profession and working up the corporate ladder.
What about mom? Did she work from the home, or did she have a profession?
No, mom always worked at the UN, started as a translator, then went on to interpretation, and then finally she was head of French interpretation.
Cool.
And she traveled the world, and sometimes us with her. Right. I remember as a kid going to Switzerland, to Geneva. For almost the whole summer while my mom interpreted for Reagan and Gorbachev during the nuclear summit.
Wow. So she was actually doing the translating.
She was doing the translating between Russian
into French. So cool. Yeah. So cool.
So she was involved in that. Yeah.
So no languages in the home? Did you guys only speak English?
No, we spoke some French, spoke some Russian, less Romanian. Right. But because it really didn't have. But so I picked up a little bit of everything and not master of none, really. So.
Were you a good student in school?
I was a good student, above average, but not, not A+ student or Sky. Early on, I was. I think during high school, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when I was in high school. She survived. She's alive. Wow. But that was really hard. So I suffered there for a little bit. My parents split just before that. Okay. They got back together. So a good story years later. But that all, I think, was partially affected. But I was able to get in a good school, went to Fairfield University. Yep. Cool. And so that's how I ended up in Connecticut. Was
not too far from here, Fairfield
University. No, I wanted to go. At the time, we lived in New York. Right. And my father had taken a job in New Haven. Right. For Unicor Corporation. So he was out here. My mom was in an apartment in New York. I was still in Westchester, but I moved to Connecticut. Then my brother went to school out here for prep. So that's how we moved to Connecticut. Yeah, cool. I was the first to sort of venture out.
Yeah. What about other activities during school years? Were you into sports or clubs, chess club or
football, something? Basketball. Didn't play anything in college. Just intramural sports. Yeah. But I played a little bit of everything.
Thinking back to those earlier memories, either from parents or maybe coaches or teachers, what are some of the more inspirational things that you remember? Things that might have helped form or direct you in your either career or your future studies during those days. It sounds like Dad was a hard worker.
Dad was always my parents were always inspirational for it because they worked hard. Dad traveled a lot. My mom was always often, doing Security Council meetings, so she stayed in the city. So there were
she'd go to New York, right? She
was in New York, So they were constantly, or she was on, trips around the world for interpretation. So they worked hard, but they were their early careers. But so I think I took some guidance in that and working hard. But from sports particularly, I think just to drive, just to continue to drive. I think all athletics are sort of geared towards pushing you to where you can go, being
winning.
competitive.
Yeah. So did engineering interest you at all, given that Dad was in the profession? I mean, you ended up in IT, so there's a relational thing there. But was that something you had early on? I mean, my son's an engineer.
Okay.
And I remember growing up at Christmas time,
Davidson.
He was the kid from 5 years old. We couldn't figure it out. Throw the instruction book to Christian. He'd read it and figure it out and all that. Were you that kind of a kid? Were you kind of into
I was a bit. I mean, you remember in the 80s, really, PCs you would take apart, you would upgrade yourself. Right. There was a lot of more manual type labor.
Yeah.
I think that was my real sort of foray into computers.
Right.
So yeah, I did take things apart and put them back together early on, but I became more interested in what the thing could do. Like I was never, I like cars, but I really had no interest in taking them apart, and getting my hands greasy and all that.
Right.
So that did interest me, but knowing how something works was always good.
At an early age. Yeah.
I had a taste of selling computers at Radio Shack in the late 80s, early 90s, and late 80s, and that was really my foray.
Did you work at Radio Shack?
I did.
You did?
Yeah, I worked at Radio. That's how I actually started.
Yeah. There's a foundation.
They started selling computers there, and what I found was really the other salespeople or people that worked at Radio Shack couldn't really sell them. They really didn't know much about them.
Right.
And at the time, it was kind of lucrative during the holidays and all that. The computers were $3-4 grand a piece at the time.
Right.
And I found, as a 18, 19-year-old, sometimes making almost $1,000 in commission a day.
Nice. Nice.
And enjoying it.
Yeah, right.
So
I mean,
if
you had the technical
enjoying
background,
it,
the interest,
and people loved, and so that's how I got into it. And then when I went to work I walked into Connect actually and asked about it. I was trying to actually buy parts for a computer,
right? And
found out that they do more than just repair; that they actually work on business computers. And I said, "Are you hiring?" And I was actually told no. And then I went into telling the person, "Well, I have experience. I sell computers at Radio Shack, all that." And the owner was just walking by the hall, and he saw me. He said, "You worked at Radio Shack?" He's like, "I worked at Radio Shack." And that's how I met the owner.
So listeners, never forget the opportunity to do something that your future CEO might be doing.
Yeah, I just went there and basically said, I'd like to learn. I'd love to, be interested in working here.
Yeah.
So I just happened to get the job. He just happened to be walking by the hallway. They're basically telling me no.
Right.
And I got the job. That was how I got in.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Any entrepreneurial things you did as a kid? I mean, obviously the Radio Shack job seemed to be pretty lucrative. It was hard to get anything else.
I was always working from the time I was 14 on, doing something, whether it be lifeguarding, that. I mean, even in high school, I started to. I saw an ad recruiting travel agents, and actually became worked for a travel agency senior year of high school, sold trips to spring break.
That's smart. To other kids.
Yeah, to other kids. Yeah. And I started doing that. I did that in college too. That was always just a side gig. I always got to go for free and make some money. And,
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So went to Fairfield.
Did
you go there because of their IT program? I know you got an info systems degree. Or was it, convenience? You were already up in this area. What led you to Fairfield University?
I'd already decided I wanted to get a general business degree. I wasn't sure, if it was accounting, if it was finance, what have you. I discovered after, I think, 4 semesters of accounting, I think was part of the business degree, that I didn't mind accounting, but I knew right away I did not want to be an accountant.
Yeah, right. Right.
So
I got a C in accountancy in college. So, full disclosure here, I pay my accountants very well.
Yeah. I realized I did not want to do that. I realized it was important to understand a ledger and all that. But
read a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement.
Exactly.
That's all you need to do.
Right. But I realized I did not want to be the accountant. So I was more interested, like I said, I always had a job, and usually that job was facing socially.
Right.
Whether it be working at Radio Shack or sales or
Yeah.
even travel. So working with people and, in general, seeing how I could help them, whether it be something they wanted to purchase or a problem that they had. That was kind of, I think, something that went through. I realized I didn't want to just sit in front of numbers.
Right.
Whatever I did had to involve interaction. So.
Did Fairfield have an info systems degree? Was that something?
Yeah, they did. But, it was a minor. So I
did a business major.
Business major, and then started taking.
In those days, there was still not a lot of developed degrees in it.
Well, I was already interning at Connect.
Okay. While you were still
I
in
was
school.
My last couple of years of Fairfield.
Right.
And so I realized that one thing I saw was that what I was learning in the information systems side in college was so outdated with what I was already doing, what they're doing then.
Yeah, right.
Learning about computer technology using vacuum tubes and things like that and punch cards.
I remember doing punch cards, Fortran cards in college.
It was great to get a history lesson, but nobody used that stuff.
It was like excavating dinosaurs.
Right. So I found that the information systems degree at the time was less practical. It wasn't useless. There were definitely a lot of conceptual things about how information flowed and how to design a system to function. Yeah. But, when I went over to work, it was really about what technology exactly feeds dollars, ship dates, purchase orders. Right. It was very different.
Yeah. Well, Connect was one of your first jobs,
Correct.
But you told me just before we got started that you had a little short-term gig with Apple.
I had a short
stint. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I had a short stint of Apple.
Yeah. And it was here on the East Coast.
It was on the East Coast. Yeah. It was based out of New York.
So what year are we, or what decade was it? Because Apple's gone through so many different iterations.
Yeah. So I just graduated from Fairfield U.
From Fairfield U.
And after backpacking through Europe for a while,
nice.
And there was
gap years are good, listeners.
Right. And so there was this opportunity. So I thought, okay, well, let me do this. So I paused. I was just interning at Connect. And so I went to work for Apple for a few months, and that was fun. It was a very different company.
Yeah, of course. So this is
1995.
Yeah. And there was a New York office, or where were they?
It was a New York office. I never went out to California. It was a really junior position, but Apple had come out with a product called the Newton.
Oh gosh, remember.
So you might say this was like,
iPhone, look that up in the
really the
iPhone
archive. iPhone 0,
Yeah, 0.0.
Yeah. So it was Steve Jobs' vision before the technology came around to make something the size of the iPhone. So it was really more of a pocket computer. It was a lot larger than your iPhone. It was
I remember it.
Black and white screen.
Yeah.
It was before the Palm Pilot.
That's right.
And actually, that's what actually killed the Newton was the Palm Pilot was a third of the size.
Yeah.
A quarter of the price. It was way less. It didn't recognize handwriting or a lot of the features. Couldn't connect a wireless fax card to it.
Right.
But there was really no market. The Newton at the time was, I think, $1,500.
Wow.
You're talking 1995. So the only people that we could sell that to were really executives
medium-sized
who
businesses.
really, executives that needed that kind of remote functionality.
Yeah.
So I went around and traveled to New York and other, Connecticut, and basically tried to train other people in selling the Newton. There was stores like
you're kind of a sales
CompUSA and stuff like that.
Sales support position.
I was the Apple representative that would go there and try to teach these. There were a lot more computer stores back then.
Right.
I would try to teach these people about the product and how to sell it.
Yeah.
Which ended up being a flop. But
that was out of that came the iPhone. So,
that's right.
Right? I mean, that's very typical.
I just needed to stay at Apple another 15 years.
You went on to Connect.
I went back to Connect.
And so you had internship with them.
That's right.
And then was that when you got the conversation with the CEO about Radio Shack, or was that actually when you came back and worked for them full time?
That conversation was just to get that
internship.
It wasn't really an internship. I mean, it was a paid part-time job.
Yeah. But you had your in there, and
I was involved in sales and all that.
Yeah, right.
So I took a pause from there, and the only other thing in between was somehow I ended up bartending and promoting at a bar nightclub. ended up assistant managing that, and turning down a big corporate job actually that I got, and my parents wanted to, like, I think practically disown me. But I was having so much fun. I was living on the beach in Fairfield and making great money, more money than my friends were making in the corporate world.
Oh my goodness!
But so I did that for a little bit, but then I said, okay, this isn't for me. So
came back to Connect.
Looked at other jobs and then came back to Connect. They offered me a full-time job.
And were you in a sales capacity there? Because I know you left there as a VP of Business Development. I think.
Correct. Yeah. So I was, I went from internship. I was basically just everything, mostly sales. But what I liked about working at a small company, which I never imagined I would.
Right. How big were they?
40 people.
Yeah. Right.
About
the same size you are today.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. But I always pictured that I would work for going through college, that I was going to go work for some big company.
Big corporate. Well, you tried it. You worked for Apple.
Right? Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, that was.
So you kind of had your foray into that.
Yeah. And in some ways, because I was on the road after training, I almost didn't. I didn't go to some cube farm. I didn't really, So in that sense, but when I had interviews at big companies, I just remember one. I think it was Anderson Consulting. They're defunct now. They're Accenture, I think. Yeah. But they laid out my life, like the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
They're like, first you're going to spend 2 years learning some proprietary coding language which nobody else but our company uses. Then you're going to do this. And they asked, and I just remember asking them, so at what point could I work actually with clients and solve problems, interact? So, well, you don't really get to do that till maybe 5 years.
5 years then.
And I said, well, that's,
Well, thank goodness they laid that out for you.
Well, yeah. Right? I realized it wasn't for me.
That wasn't for you.
They're telling me I have to be a backroom coder, analyst, everything.
Right.
And I don't actually get to talk and deal with client situations. Yeah. So I didn't want
too much
that.
Personality. Yeah. When do you remember when you first started managing people? It must have been at Connect.
Right? It was at Connect. Yeah. I managed some
and
sales.
What role were you? Sales manager?
Yeah, I managed some sales and operations folks there before I left.
What were some of the challenges that you had in those early days? Were they people that were older than you and had been with the company for a while?
I had some of that. There was some definitely difficult situation. Yeah, there was, I remember a salesperson, 10 plus years older than me, didn't really like that.
A little chip on their shoulder.
Yeah.
How'd you handle that? How do you handle those difficult situations?
I tried to always treat them with respect and always, not micromanage, but I had to set things if they were right, but as long as they were doing their job and certain ways I wanted things done, but otherwise I never said, I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm trying to, act like it. And
you listen to them, you hear, because they've got some legacy knowledge.
There. I think once in general, if you treat people with respect and they don't think you're a jerk or some, I think that's a comment. Sometimes it doesn't always work, but at least I feel like that's how you have to approach your relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah. So. We've all had mentors and a few tormentors in our careers. Do you remember any mentors that, were important to you as you were, climbing the ladder and going through your years?
At Connect, there was a guy named Ed Duche.
Okay. Hey, Ed, if you're listening.
Fortunately, Ed passed away.
Upstairs. Bro.
Upstairs. Yeah. So he was a great mentor. I sat outside his office and listened to how he talked to clients.
Wow. Was he in sales? Or
he was in sales. Yeah. And he actually was VP of sales before.
Okay. Before you took over.
I learned a lot from him. Learned about how to be confident, how to disseminate information, I think, quickly.
Yeah.
He had to, study the sheets, learn what's important, and, get there. Whereas I'd always like, okay, here's a stack of everything I need to learn. I'm going to go through every page and learn.
Right.
And he taught me how to know where to find the information that you need.
Wow.
He said, a great lawyer doesn't know every law or case by heart, but they know where on the bookshelf to get where to find it.
Yeah.
They need
good.
it.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
What about tormentors? You don't have to mention any names, but it's kind of behavior that you saw that said, wow, I never want to be a leader like that.
Oh, people that I
don't mention their names.
Okay.
Behavior that you might have seen, as you were coming up, particularly in the sales organization, and said, wow, I'm never going to be that guy. I'm never going to do that thing.
Yeah, there were others. There were. Okay, without mentioning names.
Without mentioning, describe the behavior.
I think the behavior of either trying to pull a fast one to make an extra buck, not doing the right thing long term.
Right.
I always felt
overpromise and underdeliver.
Correct.
Kind of thing.
Yeah, I never wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I never wanted to have a bad. I said it's going to be a bad relationship. Either they're going to hold you against it or whatever. You never, So I recognized right away. The idea was long-term relationships. Do right, and you'll have long-term relationships for life. Yeah. I think that goes personally or in business.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. So Flagship's almost 23 years old.
That's unbelievable.
I know. I was going to say, you're a young guy, man. You're just a kiddo when you got this thing up and running. Now, what was the motivation behind that? Did you work with your co-founder at Connect, or was that kind of an industry thing? Tell us a little bit of that.
I worked with someone who was head of engineering at Connect, and we had left to start our own company.
Right.
At first, we thought it would be in partnership with people at Connect.
Right.
We wanted to work on cloud before it was called cloud, and proactive IT management versus reactive.
Right.
And we met our third partner, who also helped invest in the startup, who's my current partner.
Who's your current partner, right? Because you bought the other partner out.
We did, about 5 years, 5-6 years ago,
Yeah. What was kind of the founding principle? What did you see an unmet need? What was kind of or was it a better mousetrap? You thought you could do something better than what Connect was doing, or was it a totally different, direction?
Yeah, we worked at Connect. We mainly worked with a solution called Novell,
right?
Which got, now no one uses that.
Right.
At the time, you could use that, and Microsoft was starting to creep in. So we were selling Microsoft stuff. I remember the owner was saying, "Why are you selling all this, Microsoft stuff? Bill Gates is, the devil," and he had a real problem with him. And then, he says, "This stuff, it needs so much work to get going, and Novell just works." I said, "I can't disagree with you. However, it's what clients want.
Yeah.
They have the right vision, and guess what? We get paid to fix this and to install it, and we're making a lot of money this way." Yeah. And he walked out of my office in disbelief. I think he knew, we're doing the right thing. Right. This is where business is going.
Yeah.
And so
that was the start. So early years, tough to get going, or it was kind of the go-go years.
We were really
back
small.
in 2000, right? I mean, that's kind of when things got started. And the internet was exploding. We had the big, dot-com boom, and lots of stuff going on in the tech field. So did you take customers away? Did you kind of, create a new direction on it?
We did work with some customers that didn't want to stay, but we started off the business really. It was hosting essentially. It was called application service provider. Yeah. It was cloud before cloud.
Right.
And so that was our model.
Yeah.
So we really were interested in pursuing that. And in the early days, besides our initial investment, we had a couple outside investors. We were looking for big money and really launching this.
Right.
Again, this is before Amazon AWS. Before,
we
never had that kind of aspiration to be that big, or Microsoft, but a hosting company nonetheless.
Yeah.
Cloud company. And so what we found with the .com bust, just a few months into it, as we were going to some of these venture capitalist meetings, these propositions were like, "Yeah, we'll get you 10 million, and we only want 10% of your company."
Right.
And 4 months later, it was like, "Maybe we can give you $1 million, and we want 90% of the company."
Wow.
So then it was like, "Well, no, thank you."
Yeah.
So in the meantime, a lot of our old clients were asking us, I need my mail server fixed, my backup, all local stuff, which we said we were going to avoid because we really wanted to do a hosting business.
Right.
So then we said, okay, well, what do we do? I mean, we're not going to get this big funding that we wanted to set up a big data center and
which
all
is
that.
probably a good thing in hindsight.
In the end, in hindsight, absolutely is, yeah.
Very good thing.
So we said we could either split up and we could get jobs. I had a job offer in the city,
right.
Which I considered, one in Austin, Texas. I said,
Yeah.
or we can figure out how to do this. Because
They
the issue we were finding was with the
support.
dot-com bust, you had companies that had, $30 million in VC money that were basically in the same bit trying to host people's business, and they would go out of business.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden there was this hesitation that we found from businesses, small businesses and medium businesses, to just give their data to you, not knowing, financially would you stay in business, because everybody was going out of business in the dot-com bust.
Right.
So we shifted models and we said, okay, we'll go back to what we were doing and manage IT. However, from the start, we said we wanted to be proactive. So we looked for something to basically evaluate, monitor systems basically, and tell us when there were issues. So it wasn't like, the way we always did IT in the 90s was reactionary. It was like the fire department. Customer would call you and tell you everything not working right. And then you'd run like a fire department over there
with
and fix it. You still get some of that unavoidably, but but basically today, and now more or less called managed service providers, which we call ourselves an MSP. But before there was that term MSP, we started that. So this is like 2001, 2002, and we morphed into that where we were proactive managing, and clients would have to sign up for basically a management agreement, versus just, hey, we know
give you a call.
Here's our hourly rate. Call us when you need us. We realized that wasn't a good model.
Because you get the commitment, you have the ongoing.
You get the commitment, you build the relationship, and also, there was a certain amount of maintenance that had to be done and should be done. And these days, security maintenance is even more prevalent.
Very important.
And so what we found was the reasons clients had issues that when they weren't properly maintaining their network. So rather than try for every hour of work you try to do for them, say you have to do this, we just said, hey, for this much a month, or this much a year, we'll take care of all your general maintenance. And then here's our hourly rate for work on top of that, or we'll have a couple hours built in. So that's how we started.
That's great. That's great. And today, 40 employees about. And do you serve the state? Do you have a regional area? Are you national, international? Tell us about your client base.
So of course we're in Connecticut, New York. We have some clients even up in Mass. We've flown engineers like to California to set up a data center. We do have some clients that have international presence with offices in London, Singapore, Belgium, but those are typically here. So typically if their headquarters are in Connecticut. So really Connecticut, Westchester, and some of New York Cities are our main client geography, really. So
how would you describe the company culture, Mike?
I think we have somewhere in between a friendly, relaxed setting and you have to work hard and serious setting. So we try to have a good balance. I would say that is really been the successful type of employee, someone that cares about what they're doing, likes what they're doing, but also realizes there's a work-life balance too. So.
Good. You have good retention in terms of the folks.
We do. We have some really long-term employees, which I'm really proud of. But of course, having grown from 2-3 people to 30, 40 people, you naturally have a lot of new faces too.
And clients as well, pretty high client retention. I can imagine.
It's
like me and my CPA. Once I get that relationship, I'm done.
We have a lot of clients that we've worked from since 2003.
That's great. That's great.
I think
good recurring revenue there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. How do you know when it's time to, micromanage someone or kind of get out of the sandbox? Tell us a little bit about your management style, maybe, and how it's evolved over the last 20 years.
So I've definitely had to try to evolve it as the company has grown, because you just can't micromanage. But it is hard. I think particularly for the things that you did early on, it's hard. Sometimes the tendency is to go back to micromanaging just a little bit.
Right.
But
well, particularly when you have the expertise in the area.
Yeah, like sales or designing or reviewing a technology, I still like to really stay in, or how something is communicated to a client. But I've let go of a lot of things. I mean, look, I would, early on, I would obviously do sales and client services, and then at night I was doing invoicing, and then so obviously I don't do the invoicing anymore. I don't do purchasing. I've let a lot of things go. So I think, creating those operations, and you have to let people create them. I mean, if you disagree with something fundamentally, and if you think it's going to have a negative impact on the client or the company, you have to direct it. But you have to be able to take a top view, which
and developing that trust and respect
absolutely,
mutually.
But it helps having people for the long term. Like our director of operations, he's been here for a long time, or VP of sales. So when you have people that you trust, it's much easier to say they got this.
Cool. What do you look for when you're making bets on people and hiring them into the company?
So we were talking about this the other day, because hiring engineers and reviewing them, of course, you'd say
they don't have a big personality typically, right?
Typically, yeah. So while the technical aspect is important, when you work for a consulting group, you're not just in an IT in a cubicle managing certain technology.
That's right.
So our technology, our engineers and senior engineers, they need to be a lot generalists in a lot of things, and then have specialties in certain things. But I really look for people that are articulate, generally bright, communicative, because they need to be able to explain to the client, so a lot of times in layman's terms, because we work with IT people at some of our larger clients, but for our small and mid-sized businesses, a lot of times you're working with an executive, a CFO, maybe even the owner of the business. So you have to be able to explain the value, and if it's a technical issue, you have to be able to digest what the issue is and options to solve it.
Right.
And you have to be able to do that. So you, and sometimes under pressure, because of course, if it's something that's affecting their system, then people start to get emotional about it.
Sure, absolutely.
So I think that's really the most important thing, being able to communicate.
It's kind of that balance, right? They've got to have the technical skills.
They do.
They're going to be client facing, and you've got a put a high premium on that relationship with clients. So
absolutely, yeah.
So
we are in the people business, and we sell technology and manage technology, but really it's about working with people, gaining their trust to manage their technology, which is moving really quickly, and going to cloud, and there's all kinds of new security solutions that come into play, and trying to keep up with all the latest things, and of course at a budget. So it's our challenge to try to figure out what is the best responsible technology, without breaking the bank.
Staying within that framework.
Because it's a cost center. Most businesses and clients look at IT as a cost center. And it, it's accurate, except that it's also innovation in IT can really help your business progress. So.
I knew you forgone an interview today for our interview, and I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. So I hope you get an opportunity to meet this new employee at some point in time.
That's part of the micromanaging.
You got to be able to step back.
My employees would say, oh, good. Mike doesn't need to be on the first interviews.
We got this, Mike. We got this, Mike.
But it's funny, because I always tell them, you want to include me like on a third interview.
Right.
But for me, I need 15 minutes. The first 15 minutes of the first interview, I gauge the person and whether they be a fit on the team.
How do you do that? What questions do you ask? What's your favorite?
Then the technical people can find out if he really is, his acumen is good. I think just in general about how they approach either their previous jobs or even education. Now I know there's all kinds of life circumstances that can affect a lot of things, but I look for stability. I look for someone who, feels like they have some kind of general direction of what they'd want to do and where they shape. If they're just a complete lost soul, or do they know at least what in their past they didn't like doing, if they don't know exactly where they want to go.
Do you have a favorite interview question, or do you like more kind of an open-ended and have your candidates tell a story?
I think not really a favorite question, but I do ask people what they didn't like, what they did at their previous job, or what they didn't do.
That's a good tell on whether or not they're going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah.
So cool.
But you never know. Every person is different.
Yeah. No question.
I had one guy slam his fist. I didn't like my last job. I wanted to kill my old boss. And he was turning red. And I looked at the other guy who was interviewing me. I said, "Okay, how fast can we?"
How are we going to wrap this one up? Yeah, not a good way to answer a question, listeners. Well, Mike, we're just about out of time, but we always ask our CEO guests one last question, and that's, what kind of career and life advice would you give someone who maybe 20 years ago, is at a point in their career, if they're thinking about maybe founding their own company, or maybe, climbing the ladder to become into their own, corner office themselves?
Always look forward, and there will always be mistakes or things that you've done in the past. Learn from your mistakes and be a better person for it. Yeah. That's something that I've had to tell myself, that I follow my own advice, and that's how you continue to grow forward. Words of wisdom. Michael Egmont, co-founder and CEO of Flagship Networks, thank you so very much for sharing your journey into the corner office. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.